my mother gave me some guidance and suggested that I probably ought to be an economics major. And at the time, I had no idea how I could potentially apply anything I could learn as an economics major into the real world, because I did know I wanted to make money, make a lot of money. that was an objective. So I thought about that originally, and I took all my core courses and you know, my first economics class, and I really decided I liked the accounting piece, and kind of reflected back on the bookkeeping that I had learned in high school, and took my first couple of accounting classes and really enjoyed them. And then I took Accounting 301 with Dr. Bullock, and decided that I could not see spending the rest of my life doing balance sheets for companies. So I needed to change my course, although I like the aspect of business. That's when I decided to go in and look at the, what it would take to get my finance degree. And that's kind of the evolution of how I ended up as a finance major. And then when I got my first job opportunity, and the one I accepted, they hired, my employment letter said that they were pleased to announce or offer me a position as an accountant. And I called them up and I said, no, you don't understand. I am not an accountant. They said, no, that's just the job classification. We're not going to really have you do true accounting. But it was frightening to me that that was, in all my work on trying to get differentiated away, that my first real job title truly was an accountant. So it took a while to get that analyst title. I think the first thing that you really have to have is a strategy and a vision, and a leader that can articulate that strategy and vision to everybody else in the organization. Because unless everybody's moving forward at the same time, or in lockstep, then you start to fall apart. You have to be able to have that vision and strategy so specific, so as there is no question as to exactly how you're going to execute it. But at the same time, it's got to be broad enough that there is flexibility enough to be able to maneuver around it as you need to. You have to have people you can trust and people that you can rely on. Building that core team of individuals that are going to help you build the business and execute the business is important. Relationships, I don't think they put enough emphasis on relationships. As a matter of fact, I was having a conversation with another graduate of New Mexico State, and he was a management major. He said he used to sit there, you know, in times, you know, with some of the management classes in regard to labor relations or human relations, those kinds of things, thinking, what applicability does this, you know, I just didn't think that that was really what drove the business. And in retrospect, that's everything that drives the business, because people are, it sounds a bit, I can't think of the right word. You know, everybody says that people are your greatest asset, and I really believe that, because if you don't have the right people and that form of that team, you're not going to be able to be very successful. You know, one of the things that I find, because I have an opportunity to interview a lot of people, both for jobs here in my own organization as well as within the corporation as a whole, whether it be one of our lawyers or a developer or someone else. And resumes are great. I mean, you know, you can put down, and that gets you in the door. But what I guess is probably the thing that I would stress most to people is that you want to get as rounded a background as you possibly can. You know, unless you are an absolute diehard, I want to be an accountant CPA, you need to be able to have skills that can go completely across the organization. Because what the way I have seen business evolve is that you don't want to be a specialist anymore. You have to be a generalist with enough knowledge in all aspects of the business world to be able to be flexible enough and fit into any job, any potential job that might come up. You know, I saw that when I ended up stepping in to run the cafeteria and and hiring a nurse in health services. You know, I knew nothing about that, but there was enough general knowledge about just plain old business acumen that I think you need to be able to focus on. So It's good to have specialties because that's always what you can draw on, and it's you know, it's certainly initially into an organization that's going to be the area of expertise. But how you can apply that across cross-border, I guess, is one way to say it, to be able to really be a benefit and a value add to a business environment. And the other thing that I could not stress enough is attitude and personality. A go-to kind of an attitude and a willingness to work hard and do whatever it takes to get done. I used to feel, and still sometimes do, that my voice is in the range of a dog whistle. I know my lips are moving and I hear words coming out, but others don't hear me. And that was a problem early on, and periodically it still happens now, is that you will get there and people don't hear what you have to say. And ironically, an hour later or a day later, you hear the exact same suggestion that you made being made by a male counterpart, and it's the greatest idea they've ever heard. And so that was probably the biggest challenge, is basically just being discounted and not heard. For a long time, and even when we were doing the transition work with Texaco Shell Star Enterprise, we had a financial transition team of a number of people, all representatives from the 3 different companies. I was the only female on it. And that was startling to me, because you walk into these into places, and here we are, you know, 21st century, and it is still a heavily dominated male world. If you look at our policy committee, our internal policy committee, we don't have diversity in our upper management. We have 1 female and all white males. And we're better here in Duke Energy International in terms of that female population, but it is very difficult. Now, I have other difficulties in some of the Latin countries, you know, going in and establishing a presence and the authority that I bring with it. I am responsible actually for managing an asset that we have in Saudi Arabia, but I can't sit on the board because I am a woman, and they are not ready for that. So there are special challenges just because of the countries that I deal in now. But unfortunately, in the United States, there has been an awful lot of difficulties that I experienced, I saw. And again, I still see periodically where there is a glass ceiling, and you don't necessarily get all the credit that you should. There are some people that are willing to take a chance on you, and they do hear you and do see you, and that's where, you know, you do get the opportunities. But unless there are people that will help mentor you along, women are still struggling to find a place. One of the big draws and one of the big reasons that I took this job was because the department didn't exist. Like I said, I had 5 people that were here in place just to do kind of the basics. But all the accounting was being done in Charlotte. I really didn't have any financial modelers here. You know, there was no risk management group, and so I've been able to build it. And it was one of those, you can build it the way you think it ought to be run. All the things you used to gripe about at Shell that said, you know, God, if I could redo this, I'd do that. This was my opportunity to build the department and put my signature on it that says, you know, this is the department that Julie built. And I'm really, again, very proud of what I've been able to do. We've brought in some really great people. You know, we built the organization. One of the ladies that I worked with at Shell, who is one of the people I consider that I am a mentor to, I convinced her to come work for me here, and that makes me feel very good that she would come and follow me on a kind of a risky venture, if you would. You know, no one here knows us other than, you know, the guy that had hired me. And we've built a really, really fine organization. I think we have a risk manager in place now. I have a market analysis group, a financial analysis group, an accounting group, a strategic planning organization, and it is really, really gratifying when you bring a deal to close. And you know, when you can ink the papers. And when we were in Richmond, Virginia, signing the papers on this one deal that I helped negotiate, it was like, this is so cool. I mean, you know, I am actually, you know, it's $400 million of money that I just spent, and it's really gratifying.
The first job that started us doing others, I remember a friend of mine and I, Cruz Alderete, who's now in Houston, Texas, and I decided we wanted to go top onions. And that was a back-breaking, horrible experience. We lasted a day and a half. A couple of days later, we bought a couple of push mowers and started doing lawns. And that was a lot more pleasant. I also did some dishwashing. I threw papers, and during the summer, as I got older, particularly in high school, I used to work construction jobs. They paid well, and you didn't need to worry about dressing up, so you didn't have any dry cleaning bills. My grandfather, Pete, which is my maternal grandfather, he was very influential in making sure that I got educated. Grandpa Mike, on Dad's side of the family, was also stressing education. My mom was an absolute believer in education as the way up for anybody. I can think of the trilogy of what I call influences in my life, and I'd have to add my grandfather as the fourth caveat to that. The trilogy would have been my mother, because I remember she used to sit with me at Brannigan Library before I went to school reading books. So I knew my ABCs, I knew how to read before I went to Holy Cross. Then Sister Herman Joseph, which was my first grade teacher in at Holy Cross. Then in college, I had Maria Gutierrez Spencer, who taught us Spanish, but she also taught you more than Spanish. She taught you to take a world view and to excel and to do whatever you did well. I'd say those three are probably the most influential people in my life. I started school in 1962 after I left the military. My first classes were in the barracks. At that time, there was no College of Business. We were a department. I remember later Professor Guthrie, later Dean Guthrie, was our department chair. And then I remember having professors like Professor Alford for some of the business classes. I had Professor Downs. Paul Zickafus was my advisor. And the other professor that I have very fond memories of was Professor Haight in accounting. I can remember the way he held you accountable for your lessons and your classes was if you weren't in your seat when the carillon bell went off, I had him for 7 o'clock class in the morning when I took accounting. I took it my sophomore year. You got a 0 for that day if he closed the door on you. And I can remember one of our classmates knocking on the door and he wouldn't let him in. I still remember that vividly. I think the guy's name was Don Henderson, who was from California. I can also remember another interesting tidbit about Professor Haight.